hi, first of all. My name is She-Lea. I am 23 years old and I do a lot of things. I am currently a master's student. I'm doing my Master of Applied Linguistics. I am also a TESOL educator, so I teach English to international students. And as well, I dabble in a bit of tutoring with high school and primary school age students. So I do a lot of different things. But I guess underlying all these lots of different things that I do, I also struggle with mental health disorders. I have had mental health disorders since I was a child. About 10 or 11, I was first officially diagnosed with an attachment disorder, which means that the way I manage my relationships is a bit different. I struggle to form comprehensible relationships in my own brain. So it started with that. Since I have been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, moderate depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And I have dealt with these things now for over 10 years. During this time, it was tumultuous, if nothing else, especially as a teenager trying to navigate the highs and lows of high school, but then to also be struggling on the sides with all these other different emotions that I had was really troubling. And only as an adult now do I have the insight to sit back and go, I can understand why I felt that way or why I acted that way. I think there is a lot of stigma around these ideas of mental health and how we should handle mental health. I have a lot of big feelings, I guess, towards these. And overall, my overarching opinion is that we will all deal with our things in different ways. There is no one way that we can all succinctly cope with these things, with whatever happens to us, because everyone experiences different things. Healthy looks different for everybody. And so in order to understand how best to cope with our mental health or how to navigate these mental struggles, we need to understand that we're all going to work differently. For me, therapy has worked wonderfully. At different stages of my life, whether in high school, coming out of high school into university, and even currently, I went to therapy this morning. So currently navigating some past traumas for me, therapy has been very helpful. But therapy isn't always helpful for everyone. While it's good to talk about how you're feeling with either someone you trust or a professional, it is important to talk, but it's also important to recognize that not everything will work for everybody. The same thing can be said about medications. I know some people are very anti-medications, they don't want to be medicated, and that's okay if you can find another coping strategy that will work well for you. Some people personal to me, require medications because of hormone imbalances in the brain. These medications help balance out the lack of serotonin and help them feel better, and that's okay too. I guess another big thing to touch on is that mental health is always coined as an invisible disability. It is always something that you can't see, and then therefore for a lot of people, they feel like, it mustn't exist, or it's all in my head. And I guess technically in a way, it is. That's where it lives, in your brain. But it still has physical effects, despite being largely invisible. I guess my big example here is that childhood trauma, especially at a young age, changes the way your nervous system works. So my nervous system is all over the shop because of childhood trauma. It developed differently. My stress hormones are through the roof all the time, which is why I have an anxiety disorder. So things like this, where I guess it is less considered that people who have these mental health disorders, who maybe aren't outwardly showing, they have very strong physical changes occurring in their body that are physiologically evident. Another way to bring this up are things like panic attacks in your anxiety disorders. They manifest in a very physical way. The stigma surrounding mental health is really, really prevalent in Australia and everywhere. There is such a negative stigma towards the notion of seeking help for mental health. because everyone is convinced that no one else has ever felt the way that they feel ever. And so therefore, we internalize our struggle and don't want to seek help. Because what if we are the only person that's ever felt like this? And what are people going to think? How is it going to affect my family, my friends, my job, my school? Our entire social network feels so reliant on who we are as a person that if we challenge that by saying, I have a problem, you feel like your entire web is just going to collapse. But that isn't the case. It's not like your whole world will fall apart if you say, I am having problems with anxiety, or I don't feel like I'm worth enough as a person, or I'm having a really hard time coping. People are there to help and support you. We need to allow ourselves to be open and forthcoming about these things in order for change to happen and for improvements to be made. And the first step is always the hardest. It's always easy to ask someone if they're okay, but it's harder to say, no, I'm not. And I think the stigma around that has made it really hard because, you're worried about being seen as crazy or unmanageable. And that, if I tell someone, will it help? Will I get better? It doesn't feel possible, especially with mental health disorders, with things like depression, where you are stuck in a rut anyway, and you don't feel like you're worth the help. But it's true that everyone is worth something, and everyone is allowed to get help and should feel worthy of help and of kindness when they need it. And that's something I always hold very dear to my heart. So, in essence, I believe that while there is a stigma surrounding mental health, I think that it's important for us to try and, overstep those boundaries set by stigma and instead look for ways that we can improve ourselves, not only as people, but as a society of people who are all experiencing something. Everyone has something that they've gone through that has affected the way they are today. And they need the help and the guidance to grow and to change and to become better. It's okay to seek help, to reach out to anyone you can, whether it be your friends, your family, your GP, anybody. So let's talk mental health.